Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very hot flat of mine today. I'm extremely pleased to have Roxana Nasoi on with us today. We're going to talk about bringing internet freedom, digital freedom to Britain. We're very passionate about, as a lot of you out there are, how can we live in Britain in this modern era in a way where we still feel like we can be happy, sovereign, and maybe not so buffeted around by everything that's going on around us. And so that's the topic of today's discussion. And Roxana, we've been meeting recently, and you've been telling me all about Logos, the community. And so I think that would be great to let everybody find out more about it. I certainly hadn't heard about it, and as soon as I did, I was like, I need to know about this and really get plugged in because obviously it's great work that's going on. I might just kind of on the website, it's going to be, I think, something that people can go and investigate after this video. But when I saw the website, I thought it was just very neatly described as headlines. It's a social movement. You're building a community there. I'm going to get plugged into that face to face. And then obviously it has the technology aspect where, I mean, decentralized technology stack for experimentation. And I was very interested in the whole aspect of privacy. As we all know, everybody's thinking about how do we have a bit of privacy? That should be surely some sort of level of a human right. And how does that translate in a technical digital world? And how do we also live a physical happy life where we're kind of got each other's backs? So I think that's the introduction. Over to you to maybe just describe a little bit about how you've been involved with Logos, your own personal background with why this is important, and start the conversation going.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carl. Hello, everyone. My name is Roxana, and obviously, I got the opportunity to meet Carl previously. I think it was at a House of Lords event. It was a report from GSR Foundation on youth and cryptocurrency, which is always a fascinating topic for people that have been in this space for a while. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack, to be fair. But just to start it off, I have had an interest in privacy for a very, very long time. I think it's funny, but I think COVID amplified a lot of my critiques around a lot of my criticism around why we live in like a surveillance state, independent of where you are in the world. So it's not like there is a place on this planet that is less jeopardizing our freedoms and our privacy and all of that. It's kind of, I think COVID showed us and the pandemic showed us that things can flatten out in this sense quite fast. So that amplified my fight for privacy. And I was lucky enough to do my TED talk on digital identity and privacy right before the lockdowns happened in Romania at the time, um, which was a bit of a nice coincidence in some way. In terms of kind of my background, I was very much interested in behaviors and patterns, right? So this was back in university. I co-built an IQ test. I was quite fascinating with the human mind and people's personalities, but quantifying that in terms of um, on a map, right? Not on an individual level, but in terms of a collective, where do we stand? And so a lot of my work over the years has been around either supporting and funding founders or being a co-founder myself and building things that I believed were beneficial for society in some capacity, which was health tech and clean technologies and you know privacy technology as well, which got me close to Logos. I joined Logos, the project, a bit over a year ago. And ever since then, I had the opportunity to get involved in different things, start the Logos London Circle, which was it was a very interesting experience because I've always wanted to do something in the UK. particularly in London, right? This is the city I moved to and I live in. I have my whole ecosystem and my support here. So that's been the journey so far. It's been quite exciting.
And tell me about what is Logos in terms of obviously we've got these two elements. So there's a community, but what's it actually trying to achieve?
Um, I would say the movement part is exceptionally important. Something we've noticed in this space is that unless ecosystems have a strong community that is committed to participating and forming bonds, right, and belonging, unless there's that, you kind of lose the human substance. So one example that I can think of, and you probably can relate to this, but the great thing about Bitcoin in the early days was its community. People were genuinely curious, intellectually and business wise as well. They were looking into how to integrate it, how to use it, how to onboard other people, how to educate others. And it kind of it became a bit of a cult, but in the same time is what helped Bitcoin survive this long. Um, and we won't go into the details of what is happening today with Bitcoin, but at its core, the cypherpunk values were very strong. Um, and I like to see it as a kind of like a commitment mechanism, right? Which can transpire throughout generations. Things that we build today, and things that we build for our community, and we know we have this kind of human connection to the technology behind it. And we can translate that into collective values. That's gonna last maybe hundreds of years. In the same way, right, Monero has its privacy community and it's very strong, and it's a community of users and developers and contributors and advocates, and activists that are broadly using it. So I would like to think that in some capacity, Logos could also be one of those type of communities where people, that there's a topic of this. I read it somewhere that said, um, we used to be born in a community and we had to find our individual pathways, and now we're born individual and we have to find our community. So for me, Logos would be the place where you just look up, or you open up a Luma page, or just search and you find the Logos circle locally, or you find that there's an opportunity to run one. You join it and you'll find an honest dialogue. You'll find a roundtable where people discuss. You'll find opportunities to solve problems that are actually relevant to the local community as well, right? And you'll find your meaning there. So I think that's the strongest point. Um, and when you find your meaning, you kind of want to protect it because it's right. It's something valuable. You found your place. You found your tribe. So you have mechanisms of protecting it, growing it, expanding it, maintaining it, and building alongside it. So that's where the technology part becomes really relevant, because you can use the technology to service the needs you have, as someone who wants to contribute to its local community. You can use the technology as a pillar for some of the things that you can achieve, that is borderless, that can guarantee certain freedoms, that can guarantee privacy, and that can essentially help you imagine I would say, a sort of like a cyber state, a parallel to what we have today.
Yeah, I think yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's trying to find the right human connections. As you said, with the Bitcoin community, people have been finding each other and building, and as you say, there's a lot of momentum there, and it's finding its way into quite a significant part of the financial infrastructure now. But I think, yeah, what you're describing is maybe some of the other elements of how people who have been involved in that and are sort of thinking about certain levels of sovereignty. I always say to people often, like, I feel like I'm the prime minister of my own little world, right? And I therefore am plotting a path which is less affected by some of the other things that are going on the macro level, and I'm taking responsibility for my own life and those who are around my local circles, like my smaller circles, and how can we, because those, I think those things have already, like you say, been what's the word, like popping up, and those bonds have been starting to be created. So it's like, okay, what could we do going forward? And I know there's been quite a bit of discussion about, different forms of living together, different forms of living together digitally to a certain extent, making certain connections. I was even talking in another sort of circle around how sometimes organizations, even like charities, are facing extinction, right? If they keep eating into their reserves, we've got certain financial challenges ahead. And if a charity is draining their reserves and they don't have a necessarily a different path out of that, then they should merge. But a lot of them don't want to merge because actually that merger isn't necessarily going to solve their problem. It's going to give them a whole load of extra hassle to go through. So I'm talking in those circles about, okay, how can people collaborate in ways that isn't a full-blown merger, but is nimble and flexible. I don't know, when we've had a chat before, we talked about mesh networks and how, on a digital level, there can be flexibility about, I remember when I used to work with another guy, Gavin, and he used to talk a lot about mesh networks where you've got, individual. It's almost like I always feel like we're kind of. I had a great friend of mine who described, we as individuals are doing like our own proof of work. We're thinking, we're researching, but then we're all little nodes in a network. And when we find the new networks that we want to build using these new technologies like Bitcoin and like other technologies, then what you seem to be bringing through spaces like Logos is a way to actually then have those conversations. And I think also I do find that there's often a case where we have these little one-on-one conversations where we're kind of working out how do
Yep.
we, live in a way where we're all on board with like, look, we just want to be left alone a little bit, live and let live. Let's and actually underpinning all of that is very much about having each other's backs and actually contributing to our local environment, contributing and actually helping our localities to thrive. But it's obviously a bit tricky now in a world which is quite what's the word they always call it, like polarized. Like I wonder about, sometimes it's a challenge to get people who are very on different ends of the spectrum to communicate. So meanwhile, while we try and crack that nut, how can we actually do stuff that in the spirit of Bitcoin is decentralized and very small sometimes? I have a background in open data as well. And sometimes, Tim Berners-Lee talk about always just try things out and experiment. And then when you get that feedback, you'll be able to do the next step and you'll start to realize, oh, if you open up your data, there's a reason why you can actually get some progress from that, but you don't try and bite it all in one go. And so I think what you're talking about is Logos is a place where people who may be familiar with these sort of ideas, they get together, they have quite I suppose, like you said about the meaning, it's a relatively private environment, right? It's a space where people can think about this stuff. And then I suppose something else, just give me a bit, well, actually give me a bit of feedback on that. There's something else I want to bring up, but
I've noticed throughout the years that people, that theory about hidden transcripts and public transcripts, where essentially public transcripts have always been manipulated by those in power, and hidden transcripts, such as folklore or theater or plays, were always an opportunity to criticize those in power without making yourself a target. So it was kind of a very unique way of saying, I'm speaking to power, I'm speaking truth to power. Um, and I think over the years, we've started losing those sort of hidden transcripts. Why? Because everything we put out there becomes a feeder into an algorithm, becomes a training material. And we're seeing more and more different projects and also different communities kind of trying to take back the internet, trying to build tools or build environments or just even platforms where you can kind of like a dark forest concept where you don't have to be afraid of anything and you can be true to yourself. And that opens up a very honest dialogue. So online you can do it by being anonymous, right? There's things that I can't say online on my Twitter handle, on my X handle, because it's associated to my identity. But if I have an anonymous account, um, I can be more honest and I can live more in truth. And in the same concept that I'm seeing, if I go to a meetup where essentially it's more of a you sit on a chair and you know messages are being broadcasted to you on a stage from guests and people talking and debates, but you're not really participating versus I just go to a circle and everyone talks and everyone can participate and it's kind of like how we're having this conversation, right? It's not scripted, it's natural. So it can be awkward at at some points, but it can be really passionate and fiery in other ways down the line. This is right. This is what gives people the opportunity to really feel like, wow, I can be myself here and I can just not be judged about the things I say and everything I say won't be used against me. And I think that's a very, very strong point. So to some extent, the sovereign decentralized technology stack around Logos is allowing us to build these kind of tools and platforms digitally. But in the same time, there's this grassroots component where we are on the ground and we are building local hubs, right? Local dark forests where people can just speak openly and sincerely about the problems that are keeping them at night or the things that they observe in their societies that really rile them up. And I just feel like that is the best kind of thing that you can have today when, like I said, everything you put out there can be used against you.
Fascinating. As you've been saying all of that, I might sound a bit cheesy, but that idea of like, got traditionally we think about sort of, well, use the word tribe, Native American tribes or other groupings have always had that sort of, the campfire, people in the community get together. Maybe,
Yes.
yeah, you've got some elders in the sense that, and I always like the idea that, sometimes somebody might be a subject matter expert in something, and for a moment while they're speaking, they hold that almost like elder persona, but then when somebody else is speaking, they kind of drop down and then the other person becomes the elder. And of course, we're very familiar with the idea that, when people are on a path of some level of, taking responsibility for oneself and kind of looking after oneself, putting the face mask, not the face mask, not the face mask,
Yeah.
putting the, the mask, the oxygen mask on, like we're on the plane. We get ourselves sovereign, or we get ourselves feeling like we're wanting to go out there and be useful in the world, put a few smiles on people's faces, and then, everybody's kind of collectively like that, and we all kind of find a way to then, I suppose, like we were saying earlier, when people make those bonds, I'm very fascinated by the bond of the thoughts, right? Because the thoughts are also an interconnected mesh of, and that ability, I think you touched on COVID right at the beginning. I mean, we were very separated when we had to sit in our environments and obviously people connected online and suddenly Zoom became like, a very successful company. But the ability, I think, very many people, obviously, we're all familiar with the idea now that humans are craving the physical, offline environment. Like I chat to people on the tube now in London. Actually, I want to make a little point of this because I've been saying like need to make this a bit of a thing. People on the tube, we all know like anyone who goes in London now, like you walk on the tube, it's a bit like a sci-fi film, right? Everybody's going like that.
Yes.
Well, they've got their headphones, and those headphones are like small, and it looks a bit sci-fi, right? And of course, most people are therefore in their own little world, right? And they're just not aware. I mean, everybody's walking around like in their world, and they're not even bothered about giving me space to walk in a straight line anymore. Like they're just more bothered about texting someone. And so I talk to people just, like whoever's, particularly if they're not on a phone or they're not on a headphone, I'll strike up a conversation because I said that it's great. You're not on the you know, and we, we riff on that.
You're not in the matrix, huh?
Yeah, we're not in that bubble, and suddenly, we kind of appreciate that. But I think, that's a random thing I do on the tube. But when it comes to people where you want to find your tribe, where I loved obviously what you said about you just want to be yourself, like, and unfortunately, we're in this world now where everything is so public, judged, dissected in a way where we kind of hold ourselves back. And I think, yeah, I loved what you said about getting around the campfire and then, giving each other space to just relax into learning and offering and sharing and belonging. Tell me something I know you haven't mentioned yet, but I think it would be really good for the audience to get intrigued by this. Well, not intrigued, but know about as well. From the technology stack point of view, so you've got this community level where people are finding each other. They're thinking about how can we build stuff using technology? How can we just, sit and be in each other's company and actually just, share our own ideas of how we want to live going forward in this world. But you also mentioned, I think when we had a previous chat, that you're looking for builders actively who might want to get engaged. I'm curious about, obviously your Logos is something which is quite visionary in its sense of potentially dealing with things at a protocol level. It's got this privacy aspect, which is one of the things that it's kind of, got as an aspect to it. But I'm very curious about, well, there's two things there. One is, you mentioned something about, how people can get involved and there may be actually some grants or prizes. I think you mentioned that could be an incentive for them to get involved. And then also maybe just, it's a tricky one, but just maybe throw in a few concepts of the kinds of things that if they're interested in, you don't have to spell out the exact things, but like, give them a sense of if you're a developer who are, have these sort of skill sets or these kind of interests, these are the kind of things that we're looking for.
Got it. So maybe just to phrase it, um, for for us, this is just my view as a contributor. Sovereignty is not just about fixing the money. Sovereignty goes beyond that. So you're looking at essentially decentralized storage and archival solutions where you could store um, pieces of your culture that could go extinct otherwise. Um, that I would say that is probably the best use case. But anything that requires some form of storage, which today is like the almost every single app we use has some storage component. Um, so that's one, centralized storage. Second one is peer-to-peer messaging. Um, this is very important because you can create end-to-end encrypted standards for communications that can be integrated into any app. So like a chat SDK. Um, there's a component of mixnets and relays, which essentially allow you to um, kind of filter out and provide additional security and safety measures to anything that you're building. Um, there is a kernel that is designed very much similar to the Linux ecosystem, right? So it's based on a Linux type of runtime, and it just works. It does the job. So then any kind of changes that you need to make to the technology stack are modular. That means that I can just fix something in one component without breaking the whole system, which is something that a lot of the ecosystems today, that's one dependency that they have. To fix something at a protocol level, you end up having to fix the whole ecosystem. And then there's the consensus component where there's specific privacy primitives that we have there to allow complete untraceability and unlinkability between. So we don't have proof of work, we're private proof of stake. Essentially, um, we separate completely the validator identities from the staked amount. So that allows you to create applications such as uh, privacy pools that allow confidential finance, allows you to have better security if you're creating validator infrastructure. Um, it allows you to have peer-to-peer communications, right? So I don't depend on any centralized system. So it's quite a big, it's quite a large ecosystem. So this allows you to play around a lot and decide if you want to integrate just a small component into an app you're building, or if you want to really build a standalone application or a protocol on top of these foundational layers, because these three are just foundational layers. So there could always be more if the contributors, which can be any one of us, any one of you, if the contributors to the protocol itself decide that they want to provide. Now, in terms of, we talked about prizes in RFPs. We really believe that the best thing to build is when you build it with the community. So instead of the core developers at Logos, which is about 200 of them, instead of them building everything from scratch, we just put it out there. So if you go to the logos.co website, you'll find the Builder Hub, and that will have RFPs and Lambda prizes. So Lambda prizes are kind of like micro grants for very specific issues for very specific implementations. And then RFPs are more mature and they require a team. So if you're like an individual, maybe a Lambda prize would be better suited for you to give you the opportunity to play around with the technology stack, look at what's being scoped out. Some of these Lambda prizes come from circles around the world. So there are circles, for example, there's a circle in LA that is building I think it was called a neighborhood app, essentially a way to provide participation in your neighborhood without being ostracized. And there's a lot of scoped out, mostly from circles. And then the RFP side, it's mostly for more mature teams, even if they're small, but quite um, quite capable of developing um, pretty significant architecture improvements or even develop financial products.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think what we wanted to achieve on this call, as we discussed, was really just to get people to be aware of Logos and then get curious enough to go and look it up. So I think, this has given, I think, people a good sense of, some of these topics we've talked about. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with, I mean, particularly the Bitcoiners, decentralized architectures. We understand that that's got a value. Everybody's understood the value of open source, and then also just this way that people can find each other and support each other, right? And use
Yeah,
the tools and get cracking really, because as we all know, there's a world that's happening in terms of its evolution very, very fast, particularly with AI. And I was just having a moment yesterday or something. I was going, some of this stuff we've seen coming, but it's no longer the future. We're absolutely 100% in the middle of big transitions, isn't it? And I think, when we
you
find it.
need you need portable sovereignty, and
Mm.
portable sovereignty is not just the money. It's also the data, the communications. It's also the governance and the consensus mechanisms, and even I would say even the violence. This is something I talk about with some of the circle members. Is essentially how do you develop tools to protect yourself, and that's one of the ways that you can do it. I think it could be interesting for people to know that we also so we have Logos Basecamp, which is it's an app environment with modules. Um, just because we believe that a lot of the surveillance happens the moment you interact with a browser. And so the idea is that you can have maybe some people are familiar with, for example, Umbrel, the Umbrel ecosystem, right? You have a small server at home and you just run everything and it's local. So the same way this app is local, you run it on your computer, and you can either just run modules and use applications that are being developed within the app space, or you could actually create applications or port your applications. right? Let's say you have, I don't know, you want a version of Phoenix, but not on mobile. You want it on desktop for paying with sats or having some sort of lightning payment solution. You could port that and bring it to Global Space Camp. Or um, like if you want to develop a mesh network standard that works with the P2P messaging protocol, then again, you could combine those two and create a um, user-facing application. And the nice part about Global Space Camp is that the front ends are user verifiable. So you as a user, you can verify the front end. So this allows you, again, that kind of portable sovereignty that I mentioned, the ability to know that I can control what I'm installing and I'm controlling what I'm using from my side. And if there's something that I don't want to touch, like maybe I don't want to touch storage because I feel like, storage is an attack vector or something like that, but I just want to use very simple P2P messaging. I can use that. I can create I can do ephemeral chatting, or it's just um, applications that just send you a message and it expires after 24 hours. So I could still do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's the classic old tech thing of user experience as well, and building things that people can get their hands on and start using quickly and easily as well. And I think that, you're obviously creating a community where there's a lot of experimentation and people can, work out what's useful, what might be adopted, and I think that's, just my own kind of I mean, some of the stuff you talked about as well. I mean, just for the audience who might feel a bit intimidated by some of the, obviously these sorts of things are being built, right? I mean, we know about things like Fedi and making, it easy for communities to come together. That's happening on a global level. You were telling me the other day about, how people are creating these mesh networks where you don't need to have a mobile network signal if that suddenly becomes an issue. And, so I know that there is a lot going on. And I think, I mean, just, I suppose it's a bit of a collective between you and me call to action for some of those good tech people out there, or, people who are just curious about the whole, like I said, with the title of, internet freedom for Britain, or digital freedom for Britain, to
It
sort of get.
doesn't it doesn't even have to be internet freedom. I feel like we have so many good examples of things that started just because people wanted to have a collective communication pathway, or have that kind of localism component to it. Like Brixton Pound is the best example. There's also a Bristol Pound, which I didn't know until I researched local community currencies. In the US, you had the Last Earth catalog, which was major, major at the time. It actually stopped in the 1970s, but it birthed essentially the idea of online communities, and Wired was inspired by it as well. So this idea of having a catalog that people can contribute to, and it can be improved in time by participation. I have a copy at home and it's just so lovely to go through it. And the stuff you find that they were talking about in the 70s is quite mind-blowing. It was like an everything catalog about um, tools and do-it-yourself opportunities, and about medicine, and about stuff that you can take, which was legal or not legal by today's standards, but also art, books, culture, community. It was lovely, and it kept improving, right? So I feel like we have created in the past these collective environments, these kind of dark forests that were servicing a community. We're kind of losing that today. So that's what I'm that's what I'm very excited about, just doing stuff locally and seeing where it goes. And I speak to some local policy groups. Um, and the one thing I find, because a lot of people say, well, okay, building parallel institutions, or building parallels to the current system, or building parallel governance solutions, why would that matter? And so when I speak with these policy groups, I realize a lot of them start well, they're well intended, but they have a coordination problem. And so instead of they will build a hub in London, normally happens in London, and then they will want to expand to other cities and other regions around the country because obviously London is not the UK. The UK is bigger than London, and they have this coordination problem. Why? Because they don't have access to standards, they don't have access to tooling, they don't have access to past examples, and they have nobody offering to support them, right? So, in the same way, like one example of coordination, think about again, let's go back to London. You have these small local businesses, and then you started having um, lobby groups that say, hey, do you want to, from the Bitcoin community, do you want to start accepting Bitcoin payments? Coffee shops, restaurants, pubs, essentially markets, everything that's a good that you sell or services or anything of that. And I noticed that there was this thing where, okay, we got them onboarded, they started accepting payments, they got a POS, and then at one point something happened and they stopped using it and they stopped advertising it. Why? Because of the coordination layer, because we onboarded them, but then we abandoned them. So we gave them the tools, but we didn't offer any kind of encouragement or any kind of support, not from the developer side, but from the community side, right? All of us in the Bitcoin community didn't push hard enough to go and spend our sats and support that small business. We thought it was cool to do it one time. There would be a big event, a big launch. Oh, 20 shops have started accepting Bitcoin payments. 3 months later, 10 shops from the 20 have stopped accepting Bitcoin payments. And so there's always a coordination layer problem. There's always this thing of how do you bridge the tech with the community that I think we're trying to figure out. And that's the experimentation part, which you mentioned in the beginning. That's where we're trying to understand when you're building parallels, are these parallels going to survive in time? Are they going to exist? And what are the things that we need to build around the technological parallels? And the only thing around the technological parallel is the community side, is community backing that technology and making sense of it.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in, like sometimes it's just there's certain a focus, you know what I mean? Like not trying to do too many things and doing something that really, goes deep in solving a significant problem. I mean, you talked about some of the things earlier about just being able to have messaging or storage, they're big topics and just getting one thing right, really right and really scalable and working. And then like you say about the support and the ability to drive it through. I also loved what you said about the being able to leverage all that goes into all of this from all your different circles. So there's not just like little gang in London who are completely separate from what's going on in other countries. So you've got some way of that hive mind actually being able to, at the peer-to-peer protocol level, you can actually all support and contribute to something bigger, which obviously Bitcoin was bloody brilliant at in terms of just being an open protocol that everybody could then think, okay, what do we build on that and what do we do with it? And that's already starting to make
Well,
it.
Bitcoin had alignment. Bitcoin had a collective alignment, right? Everyone was in agreement that this was the way to fix the money problem, and this was, completely open source. There was no central figure behind it, and it just worked, and it would improve in time. And it's slowly losing that kind of collective alignment because now it's being used depending on the group interest behind it, right? To store value or to pump up the stock prices or savings or very rarely P2P cash, which has kind of it's something that you do because you've always dreamed of buying a train ticket with Bitcoin or just buying a coffee with Bitcoin. And once it happened, that was the moment, right? And now that kind of spirit has died, but the other spirit that is sort of coming back to life is this opportunity for people to come together and really focus on where they live, improving their local environment. And if the local environment doesn't satisfy them anymore, then execute, kind of implementing this sort of exit strategy and the ability to let go of that ecosystem that you've tried to build and stopped servicing you.
All right. Well, look, I think that's a place for us to just get people to look, just go and check out Logos and attend a circle because we could talk for obviously a lot. And I think we were going into a potential quite big topic. So I think maybe that's for when people go and meet face to face. But just tell us, I mean, obviously I'll put the links in the description below, but it's logos.co is the
Yeah.
website. And that also has obviously the events. I know you do those in London and I mean, they're globally, but I think they're London monthly. I know we're recording this on a Wednesday, 27th of May, and there's one coming up, but I'm not sure when I'll post this video. So anyway, they come around very quickly once a month, maybe a break over summer, but people can check it all out. Yeah.
Yes. And one last thing, if you enjoyed reading The Sovereign Individual, then you'll probably enjoy reading Farewell to Westphalia as well, which is the
Which
book
one?
that Farewell to Westphalia.
Farewell to her.
Westphalia.
Oh yeah.
It's written by Peter Ludlow and Jared Hope. Jared is the co-founder of Logos.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Roxana. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been really interesting. And I think it's just the beginning of, another wave of things that people can feel like, okay, well, that's going on and that's something I want to go and find out a bit more about. So I'll see you soon and we'll keep building and keep living in Britain and in a way that suits us.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carl. Have a good day.
See you later, everyone.